Hello, everybody, and welcome to the kickoff for Erg Intensive this year. So this is the third year we've done this program. It's designed to take you through 3 months of training on the indoor rower from December through to the end of February, which incorporates most of the big countries' indoor rowing competitions and the World Rowing Indoor Competition. Now, we'll talk a little bit about the formats and what that involves later on. But the opportunity for this program is to join coached sessions with Sam Dutney. So, Sam, welcome to yet another Erg Intensive. You're muted.
Thanks very much, Rebecca. We obviously had a few people who did it last year as well. So hopefully we've got a few people who we've already met, but looking forward to meeting a whole new group of athletes this year around.
Yeah, and how fortunate that it's still the Thanksgiving weekend in the USA. So obviously people are sitting on their couch regretting having eaten so many turkey and what is it they eat? Pumpkin pie.
Pecan pie, pumpkin pie. My wife's actually from California, so we did Thanksgiving as well.
Oh, nice. So as people have worked out, you can use the comments to tell us where you are, and always delightful to see here somebody staying up late in the UK. And use this as we go along to ask your questions. So what we will do is, if the question is really pertinent to what Sam's talking about at that very minute, I'll put it up on screen and Sam will answer it as we go along, but we will definitely do questions at the end. Before we kick into the detail, let me explain what we're going to do today. So today is a showcase, just to give you a taster of what it's like working with Sam, working with Faster Masters Rowing. The way our business works is we're an online education business. So we have self-guided learning on an e-learning platform. So you log in, you get to a learning center, which has modules and lessons. In this case, the lessons are very straightforward. There are lessons with the training program. At the moment, only December is live, but come the end of December, you'll get January and then you'll get February. And then there's another set of modules which give you the dates that we're going to be doing the calls with Sam. They're approximately every 2 weeks. Obviously, we've got the holiday season coming up. And so as a consequence, we're going to be skipping the let's do it on Christmas Day option and giving a little bit of time through till the new year. So there's one gap that's not a 2-week interval. Each of those calls has a specific agenda, what we will cover off in those calls. But as an entity overall, they'll take you through how to do the program, feedback on how you are performing, your testing results and interpreting them, Erg video analysis, if you submit video of yourself, what to do better or differently, some drills, a lot about preparing to race, writing a racing program so that you have a plan for your race and how to execute different bits of that plan. So that's a very high level overview. If at any time you think I'm in, the QR code on the screen will stay throughout this video. So all you have to do is click on that and that'll take you through to more detail and how to sign up. So Sam, take us away. What are we going to learn today?
Thanks very much, Rebecca. Just my name is Sam Dutney. I'm a high performance rowing coach and exercise scientist. I've worked with schools, clubs, masters, and high performance athletes for nearly 20 years. What we're going to be doing in this intensive, as Rebecca's outlined, is giving you a program that is tailored to you so that you can get your best results over the course of this winter. So when you join this program, you're not only going to get a structured program so that you have some direction and guidance around how you should be training, you're going to be getting a program that is actually tailored to your physiology through some simple testing that we'll go through shortly. Now, the first question a lot of people sort of ask in this area is, why do I actually need something that's tailored? If there's something that I've seen before that someone else has done and has worked, surely that means that training is solved and I just need to do that. Well, Not really, because the reality is that everyone is different. And we already know this instinctively. Everyone's different from the perspective of their physiology, from the perspective of their training background. And so what types of things are going to be their strengths and weaknesses? So this is why, rather than just relying on one test, or rather than doing just a 2K and deciding, therefore, this is how we're going to calculate everything, what we actually do is we do 3 simple tests. And these tests are going to provide information about your physiological strengths, weaknesses, and also what type of training you are likely to respond best to, which means that the training that you do over the course of the program is going to be as effective as possible in actually getting you the best result over that time, whatever the race distance you're going to be targeting is. Because obviously we're aware that there's not a 2,000 meter erg at the World Indoors this year. So you may be focusing on a different event. You may be focusing on a different race distance. This is going to allow you to tailor to whatever that is. So once you've ready to complete the test, which we'll go through in the first week's program, you're going to have done a 7-stroke max test. Now, 7-stroke max is, as the name implies, it is 7 strokes from a standing start, full rate, full power, full intent, with the idea of producing the biggest number of watts on the screen for any one stroke that you possibly can. That's what you're going to record. The second test is a 60-second max. So this is, again, as the name implies, it's 60 seconds, no restrictions, the maximum distance you can travel in 60 seconds, and you're going to be recording the average watts. And the third test is a 30-minute rate 20. So this is 30 minutes with capped at a stroke rate of 20. Again, how far can you get in that time given that constraint, and recording, again, the average watts. Now, once you have completed these 3 tests, you're going to be able to enter them into this document here. If Rebecca wouldn't mind sharing my letting me share my screen. Here we go. So this is a document that you're going to get access to when you join the program, that has, and it's going to be available in this first week's training. So as an explanation of each of the tests that you're going to go through, as you complete the tests, you're then going to be able to enter this data into this tab here. So you're going to drop down, you're going to select whether a male or female athlete. You're going to input your testing results, and it's then going to give you a breakdown of where your strengths and weaknesses are. So based on this example here, it's told this person that their anaerobic is their weakest system. They have a major weakness in that area, and they have a forecast time for their 2,000 meters. Now, this is obviously going to be the same whether you're, whatever your numbers may end up being, it's still going to go through the process of identifying for either a male or a female athlete. And as you can see, the calculations are different depending on whether you are male or female, and provide a forecast 2,000 meter time. That's then going to feed into this training zone calculator and populate all of the different intensities that you should be at for different types of training, so that whatever the session that's been specified is, you know exactly what splits. As you input your information, you'll know exactly what heart rates you need to hold, and so forth, so that you can make sure that the training you do over the course of this program is not only tailored to your needs, but is also specific to how you execute doing that training, which is going to mean that you have the maximum opportunity to make as much improvement as you possibly can. So, obviously, you're not necessarily going to be racing 2,000 meters, especially if you are doing the World Indoors. However, we use the 2,000 meter as a reference point just because it's a common anchor point in rowing, and means that we're going to be able to use that to identify those training zones. Regardless of the distance that you're racing, your program will be tailored to what it is that you're trying to do. So there'll be an option depending on what your target distance is and the event that you're planning on targeting over this winter. The indicative 2K time provided there, just for reference, is typically accurate to within 1 split point either side. However, I would also specify that that is dependent on you doing the testing well. So if there's a testing that doesn't go, or you don't feel you did your best on it, it may mean that number is a little bit skewed, but that's something that we can help you to clarify as well. So finally, we're going to have a look at the testing information, the program itself, to talk about how you're going to actually complete these tests. So this is a copy of the first week of the training program. Now, obviously, if you're part of the British Rowing Indoor Championships this week, you wouldn't complete the first week's program in the first week. You would actually complete it in the second week and then continue on from there after Brick is finished. So as we go through, there's a little bit of information on the first page about some of the notation that's used. So referencing the warm-up being the recommended warm-up time, and also for certain types of sessions, the structure of that warm-up, what the main body of work is, what the rest periods are, as well as some of this notation around stroke rate, minutes, seconds. And you'll also notice that certain sessions have an asterisk on them. This is the session where if you're not in a position where you can train, 6 times a week, these are the sessions you should prioritize, and then you can add the other sessions in as you require them. This will make sense as we go through. So the first of these tests is on day 1, which is an asterisk. So this is one of the key sessions for this week, given that the purpose is testing. There is a breakdown of how to complete your warm-up. Now,
Sam,
bear in mind that...
make your screen a little bigger. Just zoom in so that, there we go. Perfect. Keep going.
Thank you. So where we've got the warm-up, obviously, until you've done testing, you may not have things such as your UT3 intensity, but there is going to be information about what that looks like. Now, generally speaking, this is going to be a stroke rate of 16 to 20 at quite an easy level of intensity during the warm-up, and you're going to include 3 by 10 strokes at a stroke rate of 28 to 32. Now, this is just part of priming your body's nervous system so that when you start, you don't feel like you're spending the first 5 minutes still warming your body up. Once you've completed the third one, you're going to wait 2 minutes from the end of the warm-up and use that time to actually set the distance. So to set up the screen, make sure it's set to display for 30 minutes, make sure that it's set up to display. Whether you prefer watts or split, either is fine. But if you want to go and record the watts after the session, having completed it with split visible, because that's probably what most people are used to looking at, you can hit change units on the screen after you've completed it, and it will cycle through presenting your finished data in the form that you're moving through, whether that's split or watts, or if you're a crazy person, calories. The idea of this is that, we're looking to complete the 30 minutes, at stroke rate of 20 as a best effort. This is really important for being able to provide accurate data. If you've never done one of these before, I would suggest that you treat it as a negative split and ramp up over the course of the 30 minutes. So you might spend the first 10 minutes at a pace that you know you're going to be able to complete, and then accelerate from 10 minutes to 20 minutes, and again from 20 minutes to 30 minutes. The second session of the week, you'll notice, does not have an asterisk. So if you were unable to train, on consecutive days, then this would be a session that you might miss. However, if you're able to do it, this is going to look like a very similar warm-up, but without those 10-stroke bursts, and then 3 lots of 20 minutes at a UT2 intensity. Now, we can talk a little bit more about this shortly. But even if you don't yet have the splits from the overall testing, you're still going to be able to train in this block, and we'll explain what that looks like shortly. On day 3, again, an asterisk, you're going to complete the same warm-up as for the 30-minute test, and then you're going to complete a 7-stroke max test. So we already explained what that would look like. From a standing start, 7 strokes, full rate, full power, full length, with a 3-minute rest in between. You can do this test up to 3 times because it's very, very short and targeting what's called your anaerobic ATP-PC system, or your anaerobic alactic system. Your body doesn't produce lactic acid as a byproduct, so you're not going to end up with that burn in the legs or anything like that from doing this sort of testing. This 3 minutes rest is just to allow your body to replenish the stored energy that's normally kept in your muscles, so that you can have another fair attempt at it. There is a little bit of a learning element, so you may find that you get better over the course of the three attempts. After you've done the third one, give yourself a 5-minute rest, and then you're going to complete the 60-second max test. With both of these recorded, it means that by day 3, you'll then have completed all of the necessary testing, and you'll be able to input all of your data into that spreadsheet. The remaining days for the week, on Thursday, is again a UT2 intensity session. You'll now have specified splits for this, but we'll also explain shortly how and why it's important to be in the correct UT2 zone. And then on Friday, there is a moderate intensity UT1. Now, if you think that these numbers like UT1 and UT2 don't really make a lot of sense to you, that's okay. I will be explaining what they mean very, very shortly. But broadly speaking, UT1 is going to be what I would call comfortably hard. The type of thing you can do for quite a long time and walk away still feeling that you've had a good workout, but not that you're overly stressed. This is what most rowers probably consider steady state. We'll talk about that briefly. And then on Saturday is another opportunity for a longer outing. So those are the breakdown of followed by a rest day on Sunday. So this is the breakdown of the first week. Now, when you sign up, you're going to be able to get access to this, so that you can complete the testing before making a full commitment to it. But what I would like to talk about now is why it's important that we train in the right heart rate zones and how they actually relate to how your body functions.
Sam, just take a pause. There's a couple of very quick questions. The first one, to confirm, everybody who's signed up for this webinar will get the recording. They will get a link to that spreadsheet that Sam was just running through with you, and they will get the training program so that you can test these things for yourself. And one question about the max power test, does drag factor matter?
So a higher drag factor will mean that you get a better score on the peak power. However, what I would recommend is that you do all three tests at the same drag factor. Now, this will mean that you theoretically could get a higher number on peak power, but I find that it is better to compare apples with apples by doing all of your testing at the same drag factor. In terms of what that should be, no, there's not a specific, you must be at 120 or at, whatever the number is, because we're not looking at your tests in relation to anyone else. So we don't need to be able to standardize the testing between individuals. As long as your testing is standardized between the tests, that's going to be absolutely fine. So there's another question there from Heather. The average weekly time commitment for all of the asterisk sessions is going to be inclusive of warm up about up to 60 minutes. So the idea is that the sessions are able to be completed in the in that time window. We're going to have a look at the training zone stuff in a moment, and then I'll explain how you can calculate this in the absence of a lactate test and even prior to having done the three tests. So for people who've never seen one before, this is what a blood lactate test looks like, or the results of it. And what this is measuring is on the y-axis is the concentration of lactate in your blood, which is a byproduct of producing energy using the lactic system. Now, technically, that is a different thing to lactic acid, but for the purposes of keeping it simple, you could think of it in the same way. The more lactate in your blood, the more you're going to get that burning sensation within the muscles that you get during really high intensity exercise, and the more that they're going to be impaired over time. The x-axis is then power output. So you can imagine that this is the amount of lactate, and this is the amount of effort and intensity. What you notice when you look at this is that the first part stays relatively flat. So there's a relatively constant level of lactate in the blood up to this first marker here, LT1, which is called lactate threshold 1, or commonly thought of as the aerobic threshold. I'll explain the significance of all of them as we go through. As you get past LT1, you see that there's a small rise in the concentration of lactate, which means that there's a small increase in the amount of contribution from the lactic system. It's important to recognize that during activity, very, very rarely is only one of your systems working. Generally, all three systems are going to be working simultaneously in order to meet the energy demands of what you're trying to do. Now, when you're in this zone, you'll see there's a smaller increase in the contribution, which means that the level of lactate rises slightly. That takes us up to the second marker, which is LT2, or lactate threshold 2. This is what's commonly called the anaerobic threshold. And beyond this, in order to maintain or to meet the energy demands, you see that there's a really precipitous rise in the amount of lactate concentration because there's a big increase in the contribution from the lactic energy system. Now, what do these markers actually mean? So this first one, the aerobic threshold, up to this level, at 2 millimolar. Now, you don't really need to know about the scientific designation of where these markers are, but at 2 millimolars of blood, so of lactate in the blood, this is the aerobic threshold. This is where up to this point, you are primarily working aerobically and using fats as the primary fuel source. When you go from LT1 to LT2, you're still working primarily aerobically, but you're now using carbohydrates as the main fuel source. And the significance of this is that there is a different process your body goes through in order to break down a fat molecule versus to break down a carbohydrate molecule. And when you do more of certain types of training, your body gets better at doing that thing. So when we train always in this zone during our steady state, which is what a lot of rowers do, you get more efficient at working this way, but you never get the adaptations of training in the up to the aerobic threshold, which is where your body gets an increase in stroke volume. So the amount of blood your heart beats per minute, per beat rather, goes up, and blood obviously carries oxygen around the body, which in the aerobic system is part of the primary fuel. So you get an increase in stroke volume, and then at the working muscles, you also get an increase in capillarization. So your body actually grows all these little blood vessels, which helps carry the blood to them. It means that you have more fuel available to the muscles, and you also get an increase in what's called mitochondria, which, if you remember high school biology, is the powerhouse of the cell, and it's what takes in oxygen and is responsible for producing energy using it within the muscle. So there's a kind of a trifecta of positive results from training at this zone. We never train in that area. We're always pushing a bit harder up here. We actually get a different adaptation. Beyond the anaerobic threshold, beyond LT2, we're obviously getting a more and more involvement of the lactic system, and we start to move into different training zones. And this is what that kind of looks like. So this work up to LT1 is UT3, UT2. This is this work that is primarily using fats as the primary fuel source. UT1 is training that we do between LT1 and LT2. Anaerobic threshold is training that's done essentially at this level of intensity. Obviously, it's a very small window. Transport is then beyond it. This is more commonly associated with your 2K to 5K specific type of training sessions, where you might be doing race simulations and things like that. And then we have anaerobic training, which is specifically the lactic system. Now, what's not shown on this lactate curve is peak power, and that's because peak power sits a little bit differently compared to the others in the way that it targets the body, because you don't produce lactic and you don't get a big rise in heart rate. Now, I saw there was a few questions about calculating heart rate zones. Even prior to having any, if we remove the testing numbers from here so that we can see that it won't give us any splits, this training zone calculator is still going to allow you to determine with quite a high level of accuracy the correct training heart rates for training zones for you. Now, the information that you're going to need to supply to be able to do that is ideally your resting heart rate and your maximum heart rate. Now, your resting heart rate is best taken on waking before you get out of bed. So some of you who may have a Whoop or an Apple Watch or something like that, that allows you to, that you can wear overnight and you can get a resting heart rate taken from that. If it's taken while you're asleep, that's not going to be as accurate, just because when you're asleep, your body suppresses some systems, which means that your heart rate gets lowered. We always are going to be training when we're awake, and those systems are going to be functioning. And so therefore, we actually want to take our resting heart rate on waking so that those systems are on, but before we get out of bed and start to stimulate our body system. So by recording your resting heart rate and then your maximum heart rate, whatever that may be, then that's going to customize all of your heart rate zones specific to you for the different levels of intensity. You can see as I change these, if we had someone with a higher resting heart rate, that's going to alter what these heart rate zones look like. If we had someone with a lower resting heart rate, again, that's going to change what these heart rate zones look like. And the reason for that is that if you have two, and the reason we use this process rather than just a percentage of maximum heart rate, is that when you use percentage of maximum heart rate, if you were to have two people, say one has a resting heart rate of 100, one has a resting heart rate of 50, and they both have a, both have a resting heart rate of maximum heart rate of 170, and you want them to be at, say, you're trying to be at, for argument's sake, let's say 65% of maximum heart rate. Well, for this person, it will be that. And for this person, it will also be that. But this person only has to stand up to get up to 110. This person actually has to do a little bit of work. So the difference is, the significance of that is we know that standing up, even for someone who's not very fit, is not going to be a training stimulus. And so we use the resting heart rate and the maximum heart rate to create what's called a heart rate reserve. And that allows us to calculate an individualized heart rate zones for every type of intensity. I have a few people that I work with who have actually recently gone out and done lactate testing in a lab. And what we saw is that there, and one case as well, VO2 max. And what we saw is that the prescribed heart rates based on those tests for them were within 1 beat of all of these prescriptions as well, using this formula. So if you have, as long as you have an accurate resting heart rate and maximum heart rate, there is actually no need for you to be able to do lab testing. You can still get incredibly accurate results using this method, which is called the Karvinen method, if for those who may be interested.
Sam, could you flick back to the training zones graph curve? Because we've got this
Absolutely.
remark from Tony. In North America, we use category 6 to 1 instead of UT 3 to 1, etc. It's never obvious how to translate from one to the other.
Yeah, great. So generally speaking, there is no first thing to say is there is no universal standard for the naming conventions for training zones, and you'll see anything from Cat 6 to Cat 1. This for a naming convention which is taken from World Rowing. You'll see cycling uses zone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Rowing Australia uses T1 through to T5, etc. But fundamentally, these are all broadly the same. Category 6 and Cat 5, as I understand it, relate broadly to UT3 and UT2, Cat 4 to UT1, Cat 3 to anaerobic threshold, Cat 2 to transport, and Cat 1 to anaerobic, where there is, and the Cat 1 to 6, as I understand, doesn't really have a peak power component, just like this doesn't, because peak power doesn't really fit onto a lactate curve properly. It doesn't matter. It's the one area, because of the incredibly short duration and high neuromuscular stimulus, that it doesn't really fit onto a lactate curve. But the training there would always be incredibly short in duration, and really doesn't need anything complicated beyond go as hard as you possibly can at that for those very, very short period of time.
Do you want more questions now, or do you want to carry on and do them later?
I'm happy to take a couple of questions now, and then I was just going to explain how to use the results of their testing to determine which program they would then move to in the future, or that can be a topic for another time. I don't really mind. So I'm happy to take the question I've got here from Heather. Max heart rate 220 minus age. If you don't have a recorded max heart rate, you can absolutely use this. In my experience, if you are even a moderately trained rower, your maximum heart rate is likely to be higher than what is prescribed by that formula. Generally speaking, most of the masters athletes that I work with, we would see that they're anywhere from 10 to 20 beats higher than that 220 minus age. So if you have nothing else, you can use it as a starting point. And if you ever see anything higher than that, just update it. But yeah, it can be a starting point for sure. Do we take maximum heart rate from training sessions? A great follow-on question. There will be certain types of training where absolutely it would be appropriate to take your maximum heart rate from within the session. A lot of the training will be below maximum heart rate, the vast majority. So there's probably limited opportunities to do that. However, the 30-minute rate 20, you'd probably find gets you to about 95% of your maximum heart rate, assuming you've done it to the best of your ability. But certainly what I would suggest is that if you have a starting point, either from data you've taken previously, or from 220 minus your age, or from dividing your maximum heart rate during the 30-minute by 0.95, anything is going to be a fine starting point. But then anytime you observe a higher heart rate, update your information so that it more accurately reflects your training. So that's the best way to do it in my experience. Going to have a look now at how you would use this information, not only to provide training zones and what type of, and give you an explanation of where your weaknesses are, but how you would then use this to determine which program within this program you would then be following after the testing week. So what you would do is, we have our results down here in the analysis, and I'll just zoom in a little bit. I've obviously put some dummy data in here. What you would do is you get this breakdown of the relative performance of each of your energy systems. It'll tell you which one is the weakest and also give you an assessment of whether it's marginal, significant, or major. Major being the most extreme level. So if someone was let's see, major weakness. Now, where you have a we have this, the first program that you're going to go on is going to be the marginal weakness of whatever system is identified. So in this case, your aerobic system. So that's the program that you're going to go on for December. And then you're going to be able to do a retest early in January, which will allow you to determine whether you need to change programs.
So I'm just going to kick in there. So what happens is Sam has written 3 separate training programs. So depending on your testing results, whether if you're a peak power weakness, you'll go on the peak power program. As he's shown here, if aerobic is your weakness, you'll go on aerobic program. So the program is going to train your weakness.
That's right. And as you go through, you may find that your weakness changes. And if that does, you would then move to a different program. And for example, let's create some data for someone here who might have a peak power weakness. When you train peak power, for instance, you may find that you get quite a rapid improvement compared to any other system. And part of that is because there's a really big neuromuscular component. What I mean by that is that power is a function of 2 elements. There is the ability to maximally produce force, which is how which would often be reflected in strength in the weights room, for instance, the maximum amount of weight you can lift or the maximum amount of force that can be produced in total. And then the other element is more to do with your nervous system or the neuromuscular connection, which is the ability to, or the rate of force production. So the ability to rapidly recruit all of the muscle fibers to produce that amount of force quickly. So there's the maximum force you can produce. And then there's also the ability of the nervous system to send the signal to the muscles, fire everything now, so that you can produce that quickly. When you do peak power training, a big component of that training is actually developing that neuromuscular side. So you generally see a really rapid increase in this if it's an area of weakness. So it wouldn't be unusual for someone like this, who maybe has 200, to potentially go to 240 or even 260 over the course of a peak power training zone. Now, obviously, in this particular example, I probably started it a bit low to show that example. So if you would, perhaps they started here, again, you'd expect to see maybe as high as a 20% improvement. It might go up to here, and it's going to change where their weakness is. So this is why it's going to be relevant that the program you commence on, you may actually change as you go through. And obviously each month as you get closer to the main events is going to be different, but the version of the program that you're on may actually change over time depending on your specific needs and weaknesses, so that the training adapts with you to ensure that you're getting the best results from it.
One change from last year's Erg Intensive is that this year we are including strength training. Now, Alex Wolf is a name that will be familiar to quite a lot of people who are already with Faster Masters. He wrote the British Rowing Strength Training Program for many years, and he's been writing our regular strength training workouts for a while now. He has written a special strength training program for this Erg Intensive, which blends with Sam's workouts on the Erg. And we are very excited to say that Sam, Alex and I are going to do a podcast together next week. And we are going to be discussing how strength training can massively improve your peak power in actually quite a short period of time, which is what Sam just mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really looking forward to that. Actually, Alex, obviously, some of you may already be familiar with him, but obviously his experience is absolutely fantastic to be able to tap into. Is just unbelievable. At this stage, Rebecca, I'd be happy for us to go over to questions if people have any questions about how the program operates. I did see one. And does the program address technique as well? As Rebecca mentioned, there will be the opportunity in the Erg Intensive to be able to receive some video review. So if you submit video as part of that process, you'll be able to get technical feedback as well as a recommendation of what drills and exercises to focus on. So when you do that, just to be clear, the idea there would not be and to say, here's 10 things you need to go away and work on, but it would be to help you identify, here's the number one thing that's making a difference or is going to make a difference to your rowing. This is what the change should be. This is what it should feel like. This is how you're going to know that you've done it. And here's some drills and exercises for you to be able to target it.
Yeah, and some of those drills and exercises are ones that we've already got video recordings of in our drills compendium. But what we'll do is we'll pick them out from there when Sam wants to highlight them, and we'll put them into the Erg Intensive. So there's kind of more material will get added based on the needs of the group. Here's the next question. Am I hindering my training by training in a fasted state, as I typically train first thing in the morning before breakfast?
Great question. The answer is going to be dependent on what the training you're doing in that session is. So if you're doing a long UT1 or anaerobic threshold training session over the course of an hour, where you're going to be predominantly using carbohydrate as your main fuel source, you will likely get pretty close to depleting your stored glycogen, which is how the body stores carbohydrates over the course of the session. If you're doing a UT2 session and you're going to be doing an extended low intensity training over that period of time, then you're probably okay because fats are going to be your primary fuel source and the body is better or maintains higher stores of that from day to day, which means it's going to be more accessible from a training perspective. If you're doing a really high intensity session, you will almost certainly start to burn up your stored glycogen. If you're training first thing in the morning before breakfast and like me, you don't want to eat a big breakfast before training because it makes you feel uncomfortable and digestion is a relevant thing, then what I would be suggesting you do is you find something that's really, really small and carbohydrate dense that is easy to digest and sits all right with you. Now, this could be something like toast and honey or a banana or something like that, something very small that's going to be comfortable for you, but is still going to give you a little bit of a glycogen or a carbohydrate boost to help you through that session. But you don't need to be eating, if you're going for a big run, it's going to be 1,000 calories burnt over the session. You don't need to eat 1,000 calories beforehand because part of the point is you're going to refuel after the session rather than pre-fueling it before. But having some carbohydrate is just going to help avoid glycogen depletion.
So Jason, just what I do myself for that, what I will do is I'll have a teaspoon of peanut butter. Not eating very much. The other thing I've also done is have apple pureed fruit, which is a bit like a mashed up banana. Next question. Do you change the program based on the age of the athlete?
So the answer to this is that no, it doesn't change based on your age because with age, your profile will change. And so, and more significantly as well, is that someone who is a different, if you've got two people who are of different ages, but are physiologically matched, are going to still respond to training in the same way. What we typically see with age is that you have sarcopenia, which is the reduction in muscle mass, and there's typically actually a reduction in the neuromuscular connection as well. So that gets weakened. So typically what we'll see is that older athletes are more likely to have a peak power weakness, but an individual is still an individual. And there's someone that I work with, for instance, who's 73 and is still a very, very powerful athlete. And for him, his best results don't come from increasing the resistance training, even though that is typically going to be associated with something that's important for age for most people, because his physiological profile doesn't require it. Someone else I work with who's, again, same, otherwise, broadly similar, but is only 55, may very well require more strength training, more peak power training, more of that top end stuff to stimulate what they need. So it's not about the age of the athlete; it's actually about the individual requirements of that athlete, of which age may alter their results and therefore what they need. But age itself is not a determining factor.
Right, next question. My nationals indoors is on the 17th of January. Is that too short for your programs?
No, so you'd definitely be able to see a good improvement in that 6 to 7 weeks over the course of the program. By targeting your specific weaknesses as identified through the testing, you're going to be able to get a bigger result faster than training in a generic way.
Next question. If you're not competing in an indoor race, can you translate the results of your testing to rowing on the water?
You can translate the improvement or the change in your results to the water, but obviously the ergo compared to the water, the ergo is a raw number, so it doesn't account for on-water technique. It doesn't account for relative body weight, which is obviously an influence on the water where you are shifting your body weight. So it's the ergo, as everyone knows, the ergo doesn't float, so it doesn't necessarily translate the numbers, but the relative importance of each energy system will translate in the same way. So if you are peak power constrained, then developing more peak power is going to make you faster on the water. If you are aerobically constrained, then improving your aerobic system is also going to make you faster on the water.
Fantastic. Sam, Talentire. I do my steady state training based on RPE, rate of perceived exertion, instead of heart rate. Am I missing out on aerobic development by not tracking my heart zones?
So RPE is fantastic. If you have a really good understanding of how your body operates at different levels, then RPE is incredibly effective and obviously very, very fast. What I would do and what I do with people I work with is I would cross-check. So if you have your trainings completed and you have target splits and you have target heart rate zones and you know what the RPE should be, then I would record all three at the end of a session and just cross-check them. And if your heart rate corresponds correctly to your RPE, then you are absolutely fine. Just keep using RPE. If there's a big discrepancy, what should be a UT2 RPE is actually the top end of UT1 heart rate zone, then what that probably means is that you're not yet efficient at your first aerobic threshold, and as a result, it feels easier to do that. What is ending up being UT1 because you've become more efficient at glycolysis, at breaking down carbohydrate for the purpose of energy. But that may mean you're still missing out on some of those benefits of the lower intensity aerobic work before the aerobic threshold. So I would cross-check. It's not uncommon that there might be a discrepancy, and if there is, I would spend a little bit of time just trying to stay in that heart rate zone for those specific sessions. But generally speaking, if you have those two are well matched, RPE is a really great way of tracking your the intensity of a session.
Dorothy is asking, how does this assessment differ from Ed McNeely's physiological profile?
So I'm not 100% familiar with, to be honest. I have obviously read his stuff around peak power, and that's I think it's really, really brilliant, the stuff that he came through there, and that's obviously been a big influence in developing this protocol. I've not read his physiological profile in total. I have seen his work about the targeted peak power as a proportion of body weight for different category of athletes. That has been part of what's informed the overall construction of the energy systems analysis. But yeah, unfortunately, I'm not super familiar if he's got a full physiological profile. I've not seen it previously. I'm sorry.
Dorothy, if you join the program, send us a little bit more detail and we'll see if we can answer this offline for you. Timothy's asking, can this training program be useful to design on water training as well? So
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. The only downside, I suppose, is that, for instance, if peak power is the constraint. That's really difficult to develop on the water just because of limitations around the environment and the skill of the athlete in the boat to, in perfect conditions, yes, you could still do it. But obviously we rarely row with perfect technique in perfect conditions. And that makes it difficult. But all of the other training, absolutely, you could do in very, very similar way.
Yeah, as a rule of thumb, most of the Faster Masters programs are designed to be either on the erg or on the water. So we let you, choose. And we all know, we've all been down to the boathouse, got there and went, we're not rowing today. Axel's asking, will the strength training be adapted to everyone? So I think maybe I should answer this, Sam, unless you have a quick answer.
No, happy for you to take it.
So the way Alex writes his strength training programs is he has a progression of lifts, and each one of them, he advises you to start with what you think you can do, and then to do 2 lots of workouts at that weight, and then see if you can advance it. Now, the program is very systematic week by week through the month, so that it advises you on the repetitions and the number of sets and the number of lifts, and those build progressively. Now, sometimes it's the weight that's building up, sometimes it's the number of reps that is building up. And so the rule of thumb is, no, they aren't adapted in the written program, but the instructions help you work out exactly what's right for you. And yet again, if you're on a program with us, we have a support ticketing system. Write in with your questions. You can even send us videos or links, and we will endeavor to get the best answer for you. And you put in half a question. I see you take sex into account, but if you want to write that again and finish that, we'd be happy to answer that. Massimo, what is the impact of adding water training to the ERG program? For example, planning 1 or 2 water sessions a week instead of ERG sessions.
Yeah, this is, as we said before, this is absolutely fine. If given the all things being equal, then perhaps the non-asterisk sessions, which are generally going to be the UT2 sessions, would be a great place for that, just because that's probably the easiest modality to still get exactly the same physical benefit, because your heart doesn't really care how it's stimulated, only that it is. Whereas some of, particularly things like peak power, are a little bit more precise about the targets and so forth. So that would be the only thing.
Erin agrees with the recommendation of eating pureed fruit before doing an early morning workout. She says applesauce is her go-to. Again, Mary Ellen's asking, if you row on the water a day or 2, can it replace an erg workout? I think we've answered that for you, Mary Ellen. Tony, is there, let's call it a weighting consideration of the week component, for example, the aerobic? If the goal is 1 minute at the virtual world and the PP and the 60-second tests are good, but are the main things to improve that event, I wouldn't want to focus on that, considering it's a minor component of the event. So you're saying that if you're going to be doing the 1-minute race at the World Rowing Virtual Championship, so this is a new race they've introduced this year, which is an interesting change. So
short answer is yes. When you sign up, you'll be asked to nominate what distance that you're going to be targeting, and there will be different structures to some of the training depending on what that target is. So if that's the case, then we can obviously, and you're not sure, then obviously we can help you to determine which program you're supposed to be on. But yes, there's different things depending on what your target event would be.
Melissa asks, how does this testing week differ from the non-testing weeks? How many strength training sessions are average for the 3 programs?
So I might take the first half. So the non-testing weeks are training focused based on the results of the testing. So within the testing, you have the obviously completing the tests. On the non-testing weeks, based on what those results are, you will have different training sessions that are based around improving the identified area.
And for the rest of the program, and this goes for the rest of the Faster Masters workout, we recommend 2 strength training sessions a week. Now, some people choose the days, but the way we set out all of our programs is that there are an expectation that you will do 3 workouts a week minimum. these have a little asterisk next to them, and they are Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Doesn't actually matter which day of the week they are, but you don't want to do them on consecutive days. Interspersed between those 3 core sessions are more low intensity endurance type training, which you can then switch out for strength training. So for example, on our typical Wednesday, it'll say strength training, or this month it's a 45-minute UT2 session, including power strokes on the water. Now that's not part of the Erg Intensive program, but the power strokes are like doing weightlifting in the boat. And so it's part endurance, part strength. So we give you the flexibility both to switch around the days to fit your schedule, but also to focus on 3 core sessions. And if you can manage more, you can do more. Krista, for those who are subscribed to the normal monthly program, how do we switch to Erg Intensive? So the Erg Intensive training program, the written program, is included in your monthly workouts, because we always do what we call a crash B training plan. So that is included from the 1st of December and is actually already live in the site. But if you would like to join Sam on the fortnightly calls, to get the individual coaching, the video analysis, to get Alex's strength training for the Erg Intensive. So strength training for the regular Faster Masters is separate from the Erg Intensive strength training. That is a separate program. You have to buy it separately, Krista, but since you are an existing program holder, we've already emailed you with a discount coupon so that you can buy it as a significant discount to everybody else, because we would love to have you do the Erg Intensive. If you can't find the discount coupon email, just get back in touch with me. Jeffrey is asking, would there be any changes to the program if you live and train at a higher elevation? So you're going to be in Boulder, Colorado, I'm guessing, Jeffrey.
From a training perspective, no, but I would. The aerobic system will likely show as a little bit weaker than it would be at sea level. So generally speaking, what I would do is I would increase, for the purpose of putting your results into the testing sheet to give you your energy systems analysis, I would increase your watts on the 30-minute by 5%, which is going to take into account that the aerobic system isn't going to be as effective at higher elevation because of the reduced level of oxygen in the air. But from a training perspective, I would still use your testing results. So if you have been tested at altitude, then your body's going to be obviously functioning in the same sort of way when it comes to training at that altitude. But I would calculate the aerobic system as being a little bit, in fact, a bit stronger than is shown in the testing results when it comes to just checking which program to go on to.
Jeffrey, we're all going to be coming and moving into your house. You realize this, don't you? Now, Andy's asking, I plan to start including weight training when I'm doing my UT2 sessions, and I plan to erg and then do weights. Which way round is best?
Weights then erg, if that's going to be what you do. The only downside to it is that, and the reason I say that is because if you do the aerobic session first and then you do the weights training, then you'll often deplete some of your stored glycogen that you then need to produce force during the weights training. The downside to doing the weights first and then the ergo is that the time when your body, so go back a step, when you training doesn't improve you. It doesn't improve your body or your energy systems or whatever. It's actually what happens during the recovery. So the work provides a stimulus, and then it's during the recovery that we actually adapt. When you do strength training followed immediately by aerobic work, the time where the body should be adapting to the strength training impulse you've just put on it, it's actually spending doing the aerobic training. So if possible, I would try and split up, even if you gave yourself 15 to 20 minutes and had something, protein shake or something like that after the weights, so that your body can start that process before going to the UT2. That's going to be better than, putting the barbell down and walking straight over to the erg and starting. Either way, you're still going to be better off doing the strength training first before the UT2 in that scenario. But if possible, even a 15 to 20-minute break in between in which you have something, particularly source of protein and some carbohydrate, is going to help you get the best result out of a session that's structured like that.
Here's a fun fact for self-motivation, Andy. I had a colleague who I used to row with who was big into protein bars. And in order to encourage him over a period like this, he would keep the cardboard boxes so that he knew how many protein bars he'd eaten, because he had one protein bar per training session. And the higher the tower of cardboard boxes built, the more he knew he was progressing to his target. Now, Wendy saying, if you are sick or not able to complete some of the lessons, should you just pick up back where you left off, or should you jump back into the sequence and skip over the days when you were out of training?
So it depends how long. If you've missed one day, you can probably make that up. If you've missed a week, then I would go back in the sequence to where you were within the context of that month. So there's a bit of a progression over the course of each month's training. You go back to the level that you would have been at next, but then when you get to the next month, I would still move on to the next month's training, because you're starting to move towards the main event. Now, if you don't have an event, if you're not working towards World Indoor Rowing Championships, for instance, you could just complete the sequence in full once you come back into it. But if you're trying to build up towards that event, then I would continue within the sequence from where you left off in that month, and when the new month starts, still move on to the next month's training.
And Wendy, a reasonable rule of thumb is if you're out for a week, it will take you a week of training to get back to the fitness and strength that you were at before you had to stop due to sickness. And here's a similar one. Kirsten asks, if you don't have access to an erg due to travel, would you recommend the stationary bike or swimming?
Whichever you prefer more. So the heart doesn't care how it's stimulated, only that is. I think I said that before. And what I mean by that is that particularly with low intensity and high intensity, so UT2 or anaerobic threshold or anaerobic training, the body doesn't know I'm doing this mode, so therefore get this type of benefit. All it knows, in as much as it knows anything, is pump this many times, pump this much, increase the amount of blood. We need more, we need less, etc. And so being in the training zone while in a different mode, whether it's stationary bike or swimming, is still going to give you the same cardiovascular benefit as being on the ergo or as each other. So really it's just whichever you prefer and whichever is most convenient for you based on your location and all that kind of thing. So yeah, either is fine. If you marginally, the bike is going to be slightly more specific because there's a greater contribution from the legs in terms of local muscular endurance and that sort of thing. But from a cardiovascular perspective, it really doesn't matter.
Nice one. Anne is asking, I was going to ask about age and weight, but age has been answered, and so I presume weight is not relevant as there are no comparisons.
Yes, that's right. So weight is an advantage on the ergo, or mass rather, is an advantage on the ergo in terms of the raw number. And if you have, for instance, if you're lightweight, some people might think that, oh, well, I'm not as good at the low rates as someone who's heavier. But it doesn't actually make a difference, because the reality is that your raw number in terms of peak power and ADRA is probably also less than someone who is otherwise the same as you but a higher mass. So mass will be reflected in the numbers just being a little bit lower across all three tests. But because we're only looking at you in relation to those three energy systems, we're not looking at any external factors or anyone else. Weight isn't relevant in these comparisons.
And Jenny is asking, is it possible to start the program in mid-December instead of now?
Yes. All you need to be able to do is to complete your testing in week 1, and then you're able to commence from there. Obvious, as I said before, similar to if someone was sick, if you are working towards the World Indoor Rowing Championships, then if you're starting mid-December, you might only have 2 weeks or so on the December program before you move to the January program. But most likely that's going to mean that you haven't changed your weak area, and so you're going to be on the same targeted program for January. Even though the program itself will be different, you'll still be focusing on trying to address the same things. So that would be the best way to approach it if you're still going for the world indoors. If you're just looking for the winter to maximize your performance and your improvement, then you could obviously start mid-December, and you might just end up being, a week or two behind everyone else in terms of which program you're doing, and still complete the program over the course of 12 weeks.
Yeah, we have had people do this program with us in previous years who just do it simply because they want to see for themselves what they could improve to in terms of an erg test. Stephen is asking, is the strength training program online now for the regular Faster Masters December program? Yes, Stephen. For the Erg Intensive, no, it will be up on the 1st of December. Another one from Sam. I know aerobic is my weakness, but say my goal is a faster 2K time. How will sitting at a lower heart rate help me, rather than pushing on a bit more into the upper end of UT1?
So is it to do with recovery? Well, there's two things it's to do with. One is to do with the specific adaptation that you get. So that is that improving your aerobic function around your stroke volume, your mitochondrial density, and your capillarization, which we spoke about earlier. That is going to have the impact of shifting that lactate curve we saw earlier to the right, which means you're able to sustain a higher level of power before the onset of lactate accumulation, which then means that it basically raises the floor, you could think of it. So that actually has a performance benefit. If you were to go away and do nothing but UT2, you would still get faster over the 2,000 meters. Now, that's not the best way to do it. You actually want to have a nuanced approach where you're actually going to be targeting different things, not just doing one of anything, even UT2. But that's the adaptation at level. The other part of it is there is the recovery element. So UT2 is at a level that your body can recover from really easily, which means that you can then essentially the harder sessions that you do are going to drive a bigger performance output, but you can only do them so often. And generally speaking, you can do them 2 to 3 times per week. So if you're training beyond that, this is why the additional non-asterisk sessions are basically all UT2, is that if you're doing additional sessions beyond those 2 to 3, you need sessions that are going to still allow you to recover enough to do the next hard session to the standard that will actually drive performance outcomes. Because if all of your training is here and you're training 5 or 6 times a week, it's not actually going to be here. It's going to be about here. It might still feel really hard because you're fatigued, but you're not actually pushing your performance up. So you want to have a couple of sessions that are higher intensity and they drive performance outcomes. And then the balance needs to be at that lower level of intensity, both for the adaptation in terms of endurance benefit, but also because it's going to allow you to recover more and be able to do the harder sessions to the standard that drives performance outcomes.
So building on that answer, Sam, an athlete said to me this week, does UT2 actually work? It feels too light to be real training.
The short answer is yes. And we have plenty of research that supports that. We have plenty of practical and anecdotal evidence that supports that, and we understand the kind of mechanistic way in which it works to improve performance outcomes. That is a really, really common idea. I get it. The idea that, well, if this is good, then that must be better. But it's not. The reason why it doesn't actually pan out that way is if we go back, Rebecca, if I can show the training zone graph again. I can share my screen. What we see here when we look at this particular graph is that with those different training sessions, when they're marked out on different sides of those, like the LT1 and the LT2, we are getting a different adaptation. And in the exact same way that I'm sure we can all intuitively understand that if you were to do an anaerobic session, you're doing a 30-second all-out sprint with 5 minutes in between, and then or you're doing 60 minutes of continuous rowing, we understand that there is a different benefit and a different adaptation from each of those two types of training. There is a different benefit and a different adaptation to UT2 and UT1. Even though they look closer together, it doesn't mean that mechanistically they're not actually quite different, because what the body is doing to break down fats versus what it's doing to break down carbohydrate strengthens and adapts different elements of your overall performance. And so UT2 and UT1, it's not the case that UT1 is better UT2 or anything like that. They are different training, in the same way that, you know, doing all-out sprints is a different training to steady state, whether that's UT2 or UT1. We recognize those are different, but UT2 and UT1 are actually mechanistically different as well.
Very helpful. Now, David is saying, I won't have access to an erg until the new year. Is this a program I can just start and run with when I'm ready?
Yeah, if you're not working towards, for instance, like if you're just trying to see how far you can improve and the level of progress you can make, you can absolutely start it, you know, at whatever time you want. If you're working towards a particular event, then as we described earlier, you might need to kind of pick it up in some stages so that you can still kind of taper to or build towards that key event. But you can absolutely, you don't have to be able to start on day one to be able to get the benefit of it.
Massimo asked, regarding weight training, is it better to focus on repetitions or to increase the weight? I usually train with kettlebell flows. Is that okay? Massimo, the short answer is the program tells you what to increase. So week by week, the number of repetitions and the amount of weight is specified. When you are doing more repetitions, chances are the weight will be a little lighter. So it's very clear in the program what to do and how to adapt that to your particular situation. And yes, kettlebells is probably okay. There are video demonstrations of all of the lifts so that you can know how to do them if you are choosing to do them with a bar and you haven't got access to, for example, machine weights. Melissa, if someone's shorter and lighter, would their peak power and other max splits be less than someone that is at a heavier mass or length?
All other things being equal, yes. On the ergo, but not necessarily on the water, because as we said before, the ergo is a raw number and the water generally reflects a relative number. But yes, if you were otherwise exactly the same as someone else, but they were taller and heavier than you, on the ergo, their numbers would be higher than you.
Yeah. For what it's worth, Melissa, I train on a RP3 Row Perfect. And one time I was training alongside another woman. We were doing the same workout and we had watts displayed. And the RP3 can be set so that it gives you your equivalent on water time. And what it did was for the same watts, because it knew my weight and she was a lightweight and I'm a heavyweight, it showed me that my split was considerably slower than hers, because obviously in the boat, I was carrying 10 kilograms more than she was carrying for that power output. Terry says, is your approach to polarized types of training?
Broadly speaking, yes. It's not true polarized training in the sense of what Peter Celio wrote about, because the reality is that you're probably not training 12 to 13 times a week. If you are, there's you know, good on you. But this program's not designed with that in mind. This is designed for people who can train up to kind of 6 times a week. And in that setting, we would use what I would term polarized training principles. So the idea, as I said before, that you want a small number of sessions that are hard enough to drive performance outcomes, or high intensity enough to drive performance outcomes, and the balance of it being that low intensity, to use the polarized training terminology, zone 2, but in our parlance, UT2.
Ronan's asking, is this program impossible for someone who's already training in a collegiate or club team 1 to 2 times a day, or can it be designed to be integrated into an existing training schedule without replacing team sessions? And if it's combined, are the effects of this personalized training being blunted by the general group training sessions expected by his club?
So honestly, this program's not designed for someone who's already doing an additional 1 to 2 training sessions per day on top of it. It is designed with it in mind. Now, obviously, you could replace sessions within this with sessions that you're doing in your crew or in your club. But if you're already training 1 to 2 times per day, this is probably not the right thing to be doing, because it's been designed for someone who's not doing that. And therefore, the overall intensity of what you're doing already, plus if you're trying to do the targeted higher intensity sessions here, may not be a good fit.
Ronan, what I would say in general, when this situation arises, I advise the athlete to go and speak to the coach who's running the rest of the sessions, because you may be able to come to some agreement with them. Say, look, it's important to me. I'd like to try and do this. And then they may release you from some of the team crew sessions if you want to do this. But let that coach look at this program and look at their own program, so that they can see the compatibility. Because you, for example, as Sam said earlier, you don't want to be doing intense training sessions on consecutive sessions, because you won't get the recovery. And as he very wisely said, the training benefit is in the recovery, and that is food, sleep, rest. It's not actually always directly in the training. Tanya is asking, how often do you suggest retesting?
So that will be within the program. Generally speaking, in the purposes of this, it's going to be towards the end of December, start of January, so that after a training block of targeting it, and then to see what the next, whether you need to shift your focus for the balance of the program or not.
And Marta is saying, what about an athlete who's an ADHD person who finds it hard to stay on the ergo for 30 minutes? Imagine for 90 minutes. There are no 90-minute sessions, Marta, so be grateful for that. It gets difficult, she says, to even end a 5K.
So from a training perspective, just for, I guess, for full clarity, I am actually diagnosed ADHD as well. I'm non-medicated, so I appreciate what you're saying. From a training perspective, you can obviously break down the components. If it's 3 by 20 minutes and 6 by 10 minutes is going to be a more manageable. It's more about the total amount of time in zone. So you could do 6 by 10 with a shorter break, 4 by 15, etc. So you could modify the duration of those blocks to be more manageable. And honestly, that would also apply to someone who was coming from perhaps a lower fitness starting point. Not saying that those two things are related, but just as a point of clarification, you can reduce the continuous duration if you need to, as long as the total working time remains the same, with obviously with a minimal rest in between. You're not going to have a 10 minutes at low intensity followed by 8 minutes of rest, because your body's going to come out of zone. But otherwise, the total time in zone is more of the significance than the structure of how continuous it is.
Sam, that's so helpful. Thank you. And thank you for sharing that. Brigitte is asking a similar question to Ronan. How would the training program work if you're on a master's team and you train 3 times a week with the team, and during those days you can't add any additional training?
Yeah, so that's absolutely fine. That's definitely a lot more manageable within the context of what this is. So what I would suggest doing is having a look at what you do within those sessions and see how that maps against the sessions in the program. And what you can probably do is fit around your existing training. So for instance, if you're training 3 times a week and you're predominantly doing, some this time of year, perhaps some longer sessions, or some lower intensity rows, being a little bit removed from racing, then you might be able to fit some of the high intensity sessions around that. If some of the sessions you're doing in your club are a bit of higher intensity, then as long as you have that bit of a rest period, you might be able to do, move the week. So maybe day 1 on the program is really, Thursday for you, and it sort of cycles a little bit differently, but you can absolutely fit around 3 days a week if that's something you're wanting to do. That's completely fine.
Maureen's asking, I'm not preparing for an indoor rowing event, but I'd like to become a faster, better rower. Is this program for me?
Yes. If you're not working towards a particular event, that's absolutely fine, because the purpose of this is to identify what is going to make the biggest difference to improving your overall speed, what's going to make the biggest difference in terms of addressing any weaknesses you might have, and then helping you to do that. Now, if that leads you to becoming a better, faster rower rather than towards a specific event, that's not going to diminish your capacity to improve through this program. It's going to be the same regardless of whether you're going towards a particular event or because you just want to be as fast as possible, because ultimately those two things are kind of the same outcome.
And of course, remember, Maureen, about 70% of your racing speed, whether you're doing 1K or 2K in the summertime, this comes from base cardio. And this program, as Sam has hinted, has quite a lot of base cardio in it. So you won't be wasting your time. And my goodness me, I think we have come to the end of the questions. So just a quick recap. Everyone who has been signed up to join this call will be sent a copy of that first week training program that Sam was showcasing earlier. You'll also get the testing spreadsheet, and you'll get a recording of this webinar. And if you do decide that you'd like to join us, we will offer you a 14-day, no questions asked refund guarantee. If it's not for you within the first 14 days, just let us know and we'll refund you, no questions asked. The program runs for 3 months. So it's December, January and February, because at the end of February, most of the big indoor rowing events will have been completed. And throughout that time, there are regular, approximately fortnightly calls with Sam to update you, to get your questions answered, to showcase the next month's program. So he goes through in great detail all of the things that you need to do, both to execute the program and then to plan and prepare the things you need around the program for your event, whether that's you privately in your basement with your erg, or whether it's a big event like the World Rowing event or the US Rowing Indoor Championships. You'll get race plan advice, you'll get preparation advice, you'll get checklists, you'll also get your video analyzed if you choose to do one. So we very much hope that you'll be joining us on the journey. The first call is in 2 weeks from today, and I will be sending you all that information by email over the next week. Oh, hang on, there's another last question. Is the testing spreadsheet just one tab or are there more tabs? Wendy, there are more tabs. The link that you've got has not been updated. So after this call, the strength training from Alex Wolf will be added into the program for those who purchased it, and that link will be updated on the downloadable program. Got it. Thank you very much. Any final words, Sam?
No, hope it's great to see quite a few people in the comments and in the chat, and I hope to actually see you on the other side of the program as well.
Looking forward to meeting you all online. Till next time.